Well, hello and welcome to Work Cookie, our weekly gathering of IOs, HRs, recruiters, and an actor. Well, you're all actors. We try to make the world of work just a little bit better. And Dr. Emmy, you're going to be leading us today, and I believe we're going to be talking about building a future-ready workforce, which must be really complicated today because I don't know what the future is going to be. It seems like we could go any direction right now, but I'm hoping there's a way to get my team and my workforce together that they can be flexible and whatever comes down the pipeline, they're ready to go.
This is my favorite topic, and so I left it for the last week of this month. And I'm super excited to share this because this actually was the topic of my doctoral research as well, future readiness. And I feel like it's become a buzzword in the working world, just like innovation has and AI. And, I think some people don't really even understand what that means. I mean, you can really derive from the words itself your own definition. But I wanted to kind of start us off with a couple of definitions that are out in the world as far as what future readiness means. And I will probably take us into a little even bit of a philosophical conversation today about what future readiness means and how we each see future readiness in organizations or organizations that you're working with or in your own research. And so there's a book that came out in 2015 or 16, James Canton. It's called Future Smart. And I have referenced this book a few times here in terms of some of the content in there. But he defines future readiness through a series of characteristics or behaviors that you're going to have or expected to have in the future. But what he kind of starts that book with is talking about this concept that most people living your everyday normal life are actually really unaware of what's coming or what is even in the technology sector or, innovations that are coming out, things that are coming down the pike from a legal standpoint, right? And so I think there are a lot of people that do intentionally seek those things out or those pieces of information out, but many people do not, is where he really started that book and talked about what is needed and paying attention to those emerging innovations and why people need to pay attention to that. Some of the other things he noted as future readiness were attracting collaborations, redesigning work processes, rethinking the purpose of organizations and teams, collaborating globally, deciphering customer desires, predicting future trends, which we call foresight in the future of the world, and having the courage to create. And so a lot of his concept there is about managing trends that are coming and creatively meeting some of those changes that you're seeing in the workforce. And he notes that there are sweeping changes happening right before our eyes, and oftentimes people miss it either through distraction or they're very dedicated to the work they're doing, and they don't realize there's an impending change, whether it's a legal change, right, or a technology change that's affecting their environments. And one of the authors that I've mentioned a few times, I'll refer to him again here, Yuval Harari. He's actually an author, historian. He's a professor of history at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and he has a book all called Sapiens. And I think the other one is like Homo Deus, maybe? I'll have to look up what the other one is. But that particular book and his kind of tour to share this book, he notes something that's very counter to what we've talked about here, which he very distinctly says AI is not a tool. He says that AI is an agent that makes decisions on its own and will increasingly do that. And it's saying that it's a big mistake, or he said it was a big mistake to think that we can control AI. Now, I don't really believe this myself. I have developed technology for a really long time, and I do feel like we could do that. But what would precede him saying that, right? And there's likely a lot of things he's seeing in our technology trends that make him believe that just as humans have controlled these things in the past, we won't be able to in the future. Like I said, I don't necessarily agree with him on that, but that is the mentality. And he's spoken at MIT before. His ideas are being shared. His book has sold, I think, 45 million copies in 65 languages. These ideas are going out there, right? These ideas are going into the workforce and into the working world. And that idea of technology is not just AI, though. There's a clip from the World Economic Forum, and I did put it in the citations here, from 2023, which talked about patented technology from Apple that actually monitors brain waves. And that particular video, for those who want to watch it later, was showing some theoretical things like, hey, what if your job did this? They made you wear brainwave technology so they could monitor what you're thinking about in the workforce. I mean, these patents are out there. It's a real technology that's already existing. Who uses it? Who knows, right? But we do know that sometimes companies surveil like keystrokes, or they make you stay on camera while you're working, even if you're not in a meeting, right? So the concept of surveillance technology is not new. And so just keeping abreast of some of these patents that are coming out, these technologies that are coming out, I think is what Canton really meant by paying attention to the emerging innovations. And some of the other ones that really I'm thinking about, aviation's got some adaptive technology for their air traffic control systems that have been recently patented. Brain interfaces, or brain computer interface, BCIs, first got patented in 2014. I mean, that is a long time ago. And we have, Neuralink is kind of the hot word of that particular technology today. But when we think about the fact that this has been around a long time, what is emerging then, right? What's the next gen when we're just becoming aware of some of this stuff and we're just talking about it now? And there's often a delay in adoption. You've got your innovators, you've got your early adopters, and that kind of first part of this new tech, many people are unaware of if you're not on that foresight front of it. And so he talks about, or Harari talks about this in a very different light that I'm going to flip to the human-centric side, because that's really the kind of topic and theme for the month. And when we look at some of the research out there, there have also been some other identifiers. Hey, reskilling, upskilling, that was noted in the Journal of Information Systems. A journal called Administrative Sciences talks about multidisciplinary approaches to future readiness, incorporating understanding of automation, robotics, AI, data, project management, interpersonal skills, adaptability. Those are some of the things they list there. So really balancing technical skills, flexibility, and soft skills with your IT, emerging IT knowledge, or keeping abreast of that. And another article that was in an industry-specific journal was talking about micro-credentials related to their industry. So this is like a really broad topic when we talk about future readiness, and how do we hone this in, right? So that's the question I'll kind of present out here. Since this was the topic of my research, I'm going to offer some of the future ready leadership side of this, how I've kind of defined that and how we'll frame, discussion around this. I wrote that future ready leadership intentionally leads with relational intelligence, ethical foresight, and adaptive innovation to cultivate human-centered environments in remote, hybrid, and tech integrated workforces. So we are integrating our technology no matter what in different ways. And my perspective is really that human-centric perspective. I do want to be the anti-Harari. I don't think humans are obsolete. He said that recently in an interview somewhere. And it's super interesting that we have these two schools of thought, right? And how do we start bridging some of these gaps? And how do we lead with through uncertainty with some more clarity, compassion, and courage, which was mentioned by Canton.
Okay, so if I'm a CEO, do I need to hire you and a futurist so I can spot these trends? Or are you, as an IO psychologist, knowledgeable enough about what's coming down the pipe that I can skip the futurist?
Well, I kind of will define what futurism really looks like, right? Strategic foresight actually employs a set of tools, right? So some of the tools might be a causal loop diagram or scenario planning based on some set of factors, right? And so they actually use tools. So if your IO psychologist is abreast of those tools to use, then I think 100% that's a fantastic person. But I will say to, IOs out there, the strategic foresight tools that are out there are great ones to add to your toolbox, right? If you want to know how to diagram a system, that's part of that sort of field or that area as well. And it's not that it's unrelated to IO, it's very related, but it's more of a niche, pillar that I would call futurism. So it depends on the skill sets, right? But those tools are actually, real tangible things to produce an output that, whether it's a report or chart or some kind of a scenario planning that you're doing based on, some set of factors.
Are there any sort of general trends that we
think you cut out, Tom. All right, so general trends. We'll retouch on that. I mean, I don't know where Tom was exactly going with his question on that, but I'll definitely touch on some trends in that space. And the topic of futurism is starting to become a little more heavy, right? And you've heard it a little bit more likely in your day-to-day conversations. I think really understanding the systems approach has been an area where I've continued to hear this, whether it is in agile leadership, which is the place that I've worked in for a technology development standpoint. Then you're also hearing systems, in the IO space and understanding systems better here. Futurism talks a lot about systems as well. So one of the really big themes I'm seeing commonly right now is talking about systems and having a holistic approach. There's an illustration out there that's super fun. It's two guys in a boat, and there's a leak in the boat, and these other two guys have got their buckets and they're scooping it out. And on the other side of the boat, the two leaders there are like, I'm glad the problem's not on our side. And so, looking at the whole system and understanding how it impacts you is not something people do notoriously well.
There you go. Nick, let's go to you.
Yeah, it's one of those things, are humans obsolete? Well, maybe, but are we trying to integrate these tools to get more work done or to free up more, leisure or whatever? And I think as you start to turn an eye to the future, the joke I always say is we're heading for Starfleet or Mad Max, and I don't know which way or how fast. But, if we take the positive spin, with this technology is more time, you can reduce kind of the scarcity mentality because there is an abundance to say, well, okay, we've got the technology to grow more food and the systems to get that food in the right places before it goes bad or anything like that. And I think there's some level of, and maybe this is a feeling that every generation has, but we're on this precipice of we're going to have to make radical changes to adapt to what's around us. And if we're still thinking in the old ways that, okay, it's scarcity, I've got to have my piece of the pie and, protect the cave at all costs, then we're probably headed for some darker places. But if we start to realize that my success triggers your success, triggers their success, and see those connective points, then yeah, there's definitely room for optimism. But I think that kind of the most important thing to think about is what is that vision of the future that you're driving for? Are we integrating AI tools so we can go to a 4-day work week so people can spend more time with their family, build better communities and all that? Or are we putting more technology in so we can reduce labor costs, so we can get more out of less, and all of that? Again, I always say I don't think business is out there twisting its mustache, but really those two goals are very, very different things. One puts people first, one puts business first. One's not better or worse than the other per se, but I know that the way people are treated certainly is impacted by those decisions.
Do you think we need then a change in philosophy at the top? Because ultimately, the CEOs are going to make that decision about, do I protect my business for my business, or do I try to integrate things more successfully so everybody benefits? We've seen both. Both of them are out there. How do we, go to Star Trek and not Mad Max?
I think it's really difficult because the thought is what got you there is going to keep you there. And so there's been a measure of success, whether that is through some philanthropy, some positive business behaviors, or whether it is through cutthroat. Like that's what got them there. And that image is still up there as success. And so it's not going to be an overnight change. It's going to be, as we look at, the changeover in leadership and aging workforce, what is, Gen X, millennials, how are they going to take those top seats? Are they going to imitate their predecessors, or are they going to react and do it differently? And then as we get through those other shifts, how do all of these big, broad strokes impact things? And the only constant is change. And unfortunately, the answer of it depends does come into play here. The situation where you need that authoritative snap to leader is still there. There are still very much areas where it is a scarce market and there's only so much to go around. And if you don't have the big enough piece of the pie, you won't be able to stay in business. But I think more and more we're seeing that there is room to create community and lower disparity But again, that is a philosophical choice that business leaders are going to have to make. I know which way I lean, but I'm a starry-eyed optimist most days.
Thank you very much for that. Alexander, let's go to you. And I just want to continue what Nick was saying and ask you a question because there's those top 7 companies, the Metas, the Googles, and they really are leaders and they're all profitable organizations. Do they need to show some leadership in this sort of area with the way they're developing their organizations and the way they treat their employees? Or should we just go, you know what, the way they do it's the way they do it. Here's a better example.
You're asking me that, Tom, correct?
Sorry?
You're asking me that specific
I
question.
sure am.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, they do need to change. I think we're seeing that. I'll use the DeepSeek AI example here, where, they've been able to beat some companies have dumped untold billions into it. I don't even know how much, but I know it's over 2. And they did it for basically the price of a couple Teslas, right? And so is there a need to change? Yes. I've had a conversation with this just recently with the chief operations officer on, we're seeing this kind of push in the legislation and the executive orders that's very monopolistic. And of course, we all know monopolies don't tend to want to compete, they want to devour. And so when you start looking at this, other countries that haven't had that same type of philosophy, like where DeepSeek is, have this inertia that they can, create something for a lot less cost and outperform. And so now the monopolies who don't have this culture of being able to compete are scrambling. Their response is, well, we need to, have the president do executive orders where we don't have to comply with other countries' privacy laws and stuff like that. That's that anti-competitive nature of monopolies. So is there a problem with that? Yes, because we don't live in just the US. We live in a global world, and you do still have to compete, like it or not. And that culture is so ingrained in American companies that that's going to continue to be an issue into the future, I think. We're seeing massive amounts of EU companies that are now having to increase up their spending and competitive nature to build technologies that are going to compete with Silicon Valley. Not Aldi. There's another one that's a big, it's kind of like their Walmart, and it's actually competing with Amazon now. So they're creating massive data centers, all of this type of technologies there. And so you're going to start to see that continue to rise. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, it does, but doesn't give me a lot of hope for the future. One of my concerns is, there are places in the world that are producing products. They're very competitive because they run sweatshops. I don't want to see sweatshops coming back to North America. At the same time, I'm not sure somewhere like an Amazon Prime warehouse isn't a sweatshop. So as much as I want these things going forward, I'm not sure they're going to.
Yeah, I mean, when Amazon drivers have to pee in bottles, which is now a joke that we sell their piss onto Amazon for people to buy, where they're shipping their own stuff. I mean, yes, we're basically in sweatshops already.
Ouch. Well, thank you for making my day so much better, Alexander. I'm sure we'll come back to you. LindaAnn, help.
Wow, that went in a different direction than I was expecting it.
Yes, I bet it did.
It's hard to segue from that. There's a couple of points that I want to throw out there, and I'm going to start with Nick's commentary, and that is, when we talk about the increase in technology or advancement of technology, and how does it make us more productive or give us more time, I don't really think that that's what happens. I think what happens is the expectation to do more, right? And then there's that gap where you're like what we experience and are seeing and helping managers and people deal with now is, say, the advent of email was, oh, isn't this cool? It's a real bane of people's existence now in the workplace, right? Because of the expectation for immediate response and so forth. So we are going through this adaptation process of how do we prioritize or manage that need for our need to respond instantly, and then the other users' need for having an instant response, and how do we change that dynamic, because that's really counterproductive, right?
Yeah.
So we're in this, how do we use the tool well and still maintain our sanity kind of a process. So I think also with the implementation of AI and how there was the commentary about it provides reasoning and so forth. I think that we have to be really careful about that level of, quote, reasoning, because when you interface with something that is not what we call mentally healthy for a human, right? If you're working with a human that's not mentally healthy, there's damaging effects for the people that interact with that person, right? And so we have to really look at, I think it was last or 2 weeks ago where I talked about how like ChatGPT and whatever is performative. It knows what it's expected to do, but that doesn't mean it's transactional. Right. And so that's not mentally healthy. And so when you're interfacing with that as a primary encounter, we have to really consider what the damaging effects for that might be. The other thing to consider is the workforce that will be coming into existence in the next 5 years or so, and how have they been parented, right? Because I read an article recently it's called The Adult Takeover of Childhood, where parenting has consumed children's ability to develop decision-making and creativity and all those kinds of things. And to the point where, and I know a company where a parent did this, where they're asking to be included in the interviews for employment. And so it's gotten far, okay? And so we have to look at, so the people coming in, do they have the ability to be assertive enough or creative enough or have the ability to be decisive enough to offset some of the unhealthy things that are going to be happening in the workforce? So.
Wow, thank you very much for that. Dr. Emmy, it seems like we're at a crossroads. And who's driving the car?
I wish I knew half the time. So often I feel like a passenger, but I really love what LindaAnn mentioned there as far as just acknowledging, being aware about the damaging effects of not only our technology, but I mean, just our inventions, right? We are not notoriously good at this. One of the most recent examples you might have seen in the news is the push for artificial dyes to be removed, right? The impacts of Red 40 on children, those kinds of things. How long has that been in food, right? So we innovate, we create these things that are cheap or easy or whatever, and we have really trained our society to just accept those things, right? Accept cost savings as a benefit at 100% of the time in some cases, right? People just have that mentality, right? So we're thinking about the damaging effects of social media. There's a lot of research out there that talks about it from the teenager's mind, from the adult mind, right? What are the damaging effects of social media? And yet how often are we still using it? Lights, right? I was talking to my eye doctor and I was like, so if we're, evolutionarily getting better in our bodies, why are more and more people having to buy contacts and glasses and all of this stuff in my family that I've never seen before? And he's like, oh, actually, it's the lights that are on the devices and not getting true sunlight instead of the light we see on our machines. And I'm like, oh, so why do we still do this then? Like, why are we doing this to ourselves, right? And so it's very interesting that we already have the knowledge, we understand, we even have conversations about it. Yet there's really not courageous movements to eliminate some of these things in a lot of organizations. They do still take the cheaper route, right? Or the cost savings route, right? We've trained people in that mentality. And so I will challenge a little bit of what Nick said earlier, which, there's maybe, one way is not better than the other. I think there is, and that's definitely my opinion. And I know that I'm going to fight many battles in my career over this because I think human-centric is the way to go. I don't have any bones about saying that. I will say it till my little old lady hands are falling off. I'll be writing about it. But it's something that I think we have to take a stance on at some point. Like what does it mean for us to just continue to consume damaging technologies, right? Because it's going to spiral at some point. I love that LindaAnn kind of brought it to that. What are the damaging effects of AI, right? But yet we're still training people how to use it because we know they have to. And so that needs to be a part of the conversation. What are the limitations? What are the damaging impacts? And leaders really have to start making some very targeted decisions to not employ certain things that are not going to be beneficial to their human workforce. And this isn't going to be everybody. I know a lot of people are dollar heavy or tech heavy, right? Tech centric maybe. And that's the reality of our workforces. But as much as we can influence moving away from this like money bag only mentality, I think that's really our job as leaders in this space.
Well, good luck with that. That's an uphill battle. But thank you for being out there and trying. And hopefully one day we'll get to that world. Nick, let's go back to you.
Yeah, to echo kind of what LindaAnn said, we know that these things are bad. Social media at the wrong time can cause a lot of chaos, in development and things like that. And we're just seeing, those people who were impacted developmentally at the wrong time are now coming into adulthood, and the litany of sort of sociological, catching up to that big bang of whatever the new technology was. And it's unfortunate that, okay, we see that it's bad, but we can't stop ourselves. I mean, people still go out and buy cigarettes, and the research is really clear on what smoking does to you. But anecdotally, well, it relaxes me, and so I'm going to keep doing it even though I know the risk, or I'm an adult and I can make my own choice. And so I think there is some of that, and I think that, again, we do have that, even if I choose not to, or take the road less traveled and put people first, how many people out there are willing to get ahead by doing the unscrupulous thing? And so that becomes changing hearts and minds, which is, the easiest thing in human interaction to do. So it does come down to, at some point you're going to have to, say, this is my patch of grass. I'm going to take this hill and I'm going to fight this fight, because I do think it's right to put people forward. And it's such an obvious statement when you say it out loud, that, how could you ever put business above people? Well, that's, the business owner is also trying to provide for people, and there's nuance to it as well. So yes, I do think that there is a better way to do it, but I'm going to choose positive intent and assume that people who are being dollar forward are thinking of the downstream consequences of those actions for their workforce and the communities that they're in.
Yes, I'd like to hope that too. I'm just not sure. Thank you very much. Alexander, back to you.
Let's skip me for right now. Sorry.
Okay, we'll come back to you. Rich, let's go to you.
Yeah. So we're talking about like making a future ready workforce, right? If we take a look at business throughout history, why are businesses throughout history exist, right? They exist, and this is specifically coming from a class that I just taught this morning on operations management, right? So businesses exist to meet the needs of some customer, correct? So there is a requirement or a set of requirements from a quality standpoint for the customer. So when the customer has these ever-changing requirements, right? As we have more technology, as we have the desire to have some level of comfort or some level of ability to do whatever, right? It's the customer that drives what the business is there for, right? Their purpose, their reason for being there ultimately comes to the fulfillment of some market need, right? So there's the human centric side of things to begin with, right? Because a robot's not going to buy things. It's people that are going to buy things, right? I mean, the robot could buy as a proxy, I'll give you that, but it's not the robot that's essentially going to make these decisions for you or whatever. So there's a recent article I think it was in Forbes, was it? That was talking about, Forbes. It was it was from about a year and a half ago, I think. But they were talking about this exact thing of making a workforce that is future centered, right? Or future ready, right? And it really comes down to, you have to have the person in mind, and that person is the customer, and the person is it's the people who are fulfilling the what you are fulfilling, right? Whether it's a widget or a service, we're a service-based economy, but in reality, we have products and services that the business is putting out there. So my point on all of that is to say that, there is some level of making sure that we are human centric, but having people who have some degree of openness to the changes, openness and receptiveness to the customers and what the customer. So having that customer centric mentality, I think, is the ultimate way that we're going to make any workforce work anywhere, is to actually have some care, and that's going to come in the form of purpose, right, to what they're going to be doing, right? So it's always going to be rallying around, what we're actually striving to deliver, if that makes sense.
Well, let me ask you, do we need a people movement, not a corporate movement, not a company movement, but a people movement to move the workforce in this type of direction? Customers of Tesla have sent a loud message that they're not really happy with the ownership. And if something like that was to come along with some of those major companies, that if you continue to treat your employees like that, we the people, we're not buying your product. Would that be effective? Would that work? And do you think that's actually possible?
Well, I mean, I think the market drives that, in the sense that people have a choice as to who they're going to work with. They made the decision to buy a Tesla, and they did that. Now they regret that decision. Okay, we're yet to see what the long-ranging effect of that's going to be. Arguably, people still like having that piece of technology. They may not like the philosophy around it, but I think the philosophy part of it does work. I mean, that's a requirement that some people have, right? Is the type of company that they want to work with, the culture of the company that they want to work with. Apple's built a tribe around that whole thing, that whole concept, right? So, as well as other companies. So, I mean, we do have to be, cognizant of that. But ultimately, again, I think it's the customer is the one that's going to drive what that focus is and what the core of the company is all about, and that will affect what the culture, the internal culture, and how people behave within the organization. So we have to learn what the customers need, right? So there's this. I just had one of my professors as a guest on one of my podcasts. So we looked at what are the what kind of structured learning can we do, right? Actual training and development type of stuff, and then the social learning that comes from how people react with each other and with the customer to create these normative behaviors. And so, and that's going to evolve. That's going to change to some extent because of the customer's preferences of changing, right? So we need to have a feedback loop with a shell of a culture that's psychologically safe for innovation to happen, right? So that we can adapt, right? I mean, so that's, we need resilience and adaptability, and that does come from leadership, but it's the transformational leader that is working on behalf of what the company is striving to deliver to the customer. I think that is going to drive the market.
Thanks very much for that, Rich. Nick, let's go back to you.
I think that's a really good point. People vote with their dollars, people vote with their feet, where they're going, things like that. It's powerful and it's idealistic, because I know that there's also the same situation where you've got 3 screaming kids in the car, and I know McDonald's is terrible, but it's the quickest solution to the problem that I have. And so again, it requires an intentionality on the individual part. And I think part of the conversation about having a future-ready workforce is what future are you trying to project? What ways and what decisions are you making to push the needle in the direction that you think is right? We could get into a deeper philosophical question of what is absolutely right, but I think that's too big for the time remaining. But I think that we try not to put too many value judgments on the opinions of others. But I think there are some pretty clear-cut matters. How you take care of people says a lot about that. How you conduct yourself in business says a lot about that. And I think there are too often times where decisions get made for people instead of people making decisions. You scale up and you have all the success, and the tale of the startup who gets bought out and they lost their soul to one degree or another. They were starry-eyed optimists starting in the garage, and now they became the thing they sought out to replace. So I think that we far too often focus on the individuals within organizations and forget that once you get to that level and that scale, the ship is kind of moving. And yes, there are people who have their hands on the wheel, but it's not going to turn quickly. To make a drastic shift in business philosophy probably means going out of business before getting to where you want to go. And so personify organizations is really easy to do because they're made up of people, but at the same point, they take on a different characteristic and a different function. And I think that we don't necessarily have a standard language of what do we ascribe as the responsibilities of those organizations, or that interplay between the individual and the organization, or the company and the customer, or stakeholder, however you want to dissect that.
Thank you very much for that, Nick. Dr. Emmy, let's go back to you.
I want to just kind of talk about the futurism thing a little bit in relation to future readiness. I've mentioned systems earlier, and I actually want to mention a tool that is used to kind of analyze systems and this coming impact that we're talking about, depending on it, whether it's technology or other things, right? You may have heard it as pestle analysis or STEEP or steeple, but it really does an analysis of social, technical, economic, environmental, political, legal, and ethical factors for really anything you're analyzing in that sense, right? But let's talk about it from a technology perspective. And one of the other tools of futurism that I think is probably going to be more and more important is that systemic analysis, and to be able to do some possible futures is what you might call, or scenario planning of possible futures. And so if we think about the possible future that we've mentioned here before in previous times, and we will even read in different articles about, let's say AI and robots take half of our jobs, or half to 90 is some of the articles out there with these opinionated, predictions out there. from players in the tech workforce, and even researchers, right? But let's go to that possible future and let's take a look at what some of those steeple factors might be, right? So you might have massive job displacement, which may have secondary factors to that, right? Related to the need for social systems to be better equipped to handle people that aren't making an income and don't have, or maybe it's a shift to universal basic income because of that, right? So that's kind of that way to kind of start analyzing through that. It will bring good things too, new job creations, but it could bring wealth polarization, right? So who's got the AI money bag? And now they're the power player in that space. And so that's, I think, a really great tool in the toolkit, whether you're IO or a leader, to start understanding what some of the social impacts are going to be in that. If you have a massive number of people all of a sudden out of work, and we can draw on history even to learn lessons about that kind of thing, which really speaks to that multidisciplinary approach. It starts unfolding in history. It starts unfolding in economics, sociology, right? So really expanding our viewpoint of what are the impacting factors to that future that we're heading towards, and looking at some of the potential futures, thinking about how we are defining humanity. I mean, that's the more philosophical side, which I'd love to get into sometimes. But as Nick mentioned, that's more probably a lengthier conversation for another day. So there's some maybe hyper personalization. We can consider that good or bad, right? Devaluing of human teachers, is a potential thing in that, right? So you can really start listing out possibilities, right? And then how do you respond to these possibilities as we move and start seeing which future we're creeping towards? You've already had the discussion of, okay, if this happens, then this. But if B happens, then we'll respond this way. And if C happens, we'll respond this way. And I think that speaks to the future readiness. And we don't often do strategy beyond your kind of 5 to 10 year strategy in organizations, right? Some of these things are really looking at lengthier strategy. So Disney has a sustainability strategy you can find on the internet. It's related to their products. They want to get rid of one-time use plastics on their cruise ships by a certain date. And they want to do, so they have like very long-term goals that they're using to build their yearly strategies to get towards those things, and then revisiting. And so that expanded mindset is something that we haven't trained organizations and leaders to have. But I think this is the right time to start thinking that when we are seeing changes already happening in the workforce.
I'm going to go on this direction. Because you talked about, some changes, and I know up here in Canada, we're in the last week, I think, of a federal election. Mark Carney, who was the governor of the Bank of Canada, went on to become the governor of the Bank of England, well-respected economist. He has actually mentioned a couple of times that the economic system needs to change. He's also written a book called Values, which I haven't found yet. I want to read it. But do we need neoliberal economics? Doesn't seem to be working anymore. It seems like we need to change the way the system works. So do you think that's a potential as well in the future, that IO psychologists are going to be, all of a sudden the game might change? It probably won't change a lot, but it actually might change for the good. So do you think we need our politicians to actually set up the system so that it's a more equitable work environment?
Well, 100%, but systems theory tells us that the outcome of the system is exactly by the design of it, right? So yes, but how do we do that really, right? So when you mentioned the economy system, but it's much broader than that. The economy is one part of the broader system in which we live, and all of these systems overlap and they touch each other, right? And so I think it's broader than just the economic system, right? We have to understand how economics impacts all kinds of other systems that we live in. And they are all integrated in some way. And I know there are some systemic analysis that have really already started looking at this in that futurism sense of, okay, so here's all the key points and where they touch and some of the changes that we need to make. But because it's so broad, I think that's what makes it such a magnanimous challenge, because you have people in niche areas that, like the economists, right, that they can see it from their perspective, but they don't see the hole in the other side of the boat that they're not even aware exists.
Yeah, I think there might be a lot of holes. Thank you very much, LindaAnn. Back to you.
There are a lot of points that came to my mind. One of them was the last time Emmy spoke was about the social impact that some of the AI is having. And I think that we have to look at how it really amplifies not necessarily the correct information, right? Accurate information, and how that can so quickly permeate the mindset of our culture. And so we have to be careful about that. And maybe we get to a point where there's a Chat GPT lookalike that is only utilizing evidence-based information, right? So that it could be segmented out so that there's more credibility, because you're just getting this feedback loop of crap in, crap out, crap in, crap out, right? And that builds the database of the current AI systems. And so we have to be careful, and maybe there could be some dichotomization of, okay, this is the generic and this is the evidence-based AI, and utilize it in that fashion. I think that one of the things that we need to look at also is, are we looking at possibly an evolution that is needed in what does it mean to be an ethical leader, right? Is that changing now because of what we're embracing in the workforce and how we have to lead? How does that change what we consider ethical in our workforce today or going forward? And to that comment, when we talk about futurism, when we talked previously, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago, futurists were talking 20 years from now. What are they talking about now? Because even 5 years from now is a stretch, right? So how much of a futuristic view is that? Or is that just a current constant evolution? That can be completely shifted at a 90-degree angle at any given moment because of some kind of innovation. And that's really accelerating. And so I think that we have to really consider a couple of those factors.
Might be time to get a Trip Braden to come and have a chat with us. At least he can tell me maybe what I'll be doing next week. Thank you very much for that. Nick, let's go to you.
Yeah, I think to your point, the idea of, do we need to change the economic system? And I think I was even thinking about this morning. What are the things that I'm willing to sacrifice for? What are the non-negotiables? Where do I put my value in? And can I zoom in on that and ignore all the noise that's out in the world as well? And it's a difficult challenge because there's noise at every turn. So I think that, yes, idealistically, could we change the whole system? But we had a pandemic that brought everything kind of to its knees, and still nothing changed. Education systems, economic systems, and all of that. And it's going to cause some damage before it gets better if we change the paradigm completely. And there's a lot of money to be made in the way that things are. And I think that there's still even more so in the ways that things could be. And with the rapid pace of change that we keep seeing, maybe we need to just say, okay, it's fun to sit here and vision cast for 20 years, but what can I do today? Everybody talks about the time travel paradox where, you step on a blade of grass and the butterfly effect. Well, you can do that from now into the future, and send out those ripples. And again, it does take that intentionality, to be values-based, to be who you are, wherever you're at in your community, in your organization, and however you radiate that out can have an impact on other people that you bounce against in the world.
It's interesting about, sort of getting that message out, because we are going through a tough economic time right now. And I don't see a lot of corporate leaders reaching out to the employees going, here's the plan. We're going to try and do the best we can. We care about you. I see a lot more secrecy going on, a lot more the CEO's door is closed, and at some time will come out and make a pronouncement. Is that what's happening, or do you think are any organizations reaching out to their employees and saying we can get through this together?
I mean, that's those are business choices for each organization. And again, it comes down to that, are you putting dollars and cents in the primary position? Are you putting people in the primary position? And let's face it, these leaders are still people. And right now there's a ton of upheaval as what's going to happen tomorrow. What executive order is going to tip the dominoes through 8 different paths that we can all see right now. And so there is that certain level of uncertainty. And, it goes back to, keep the stone over the cave door, like let's protect what we can. And so everybody kind of contracts when there is uncertainty and fear, because we're not wired to be great optimists or, forecast too far in the future. So I think there's a certain level of human behavior there as the dust starts to settle or as things gain some permanence or clear direction. I think then you'll see people go, okay, I have my marching orders and this is the way we're going to go. And hopefully the great leaders rise out and say, okay, we're going to fight this thing together. Or they're going to say, you know what, we're going to wave the white flag and just go with whatever it is.
Thank you very much for that. LindaAnn, back to you.
Yeah, I read an article recently about the current state of economy throughout, not just in the US, but how it's affecting the world. And this article indicated that, we may be on the brink of not just a recession, but a complete change in monetary systems, right? And so if we were, say it creates the ideal opportunity for crypto to take effect, right? Would that create an equalization in monetary systems? So we're not doing pesos to dollars kind of thing, right? And how would that affect the different cultures that are on a completely different level from, say, North America or whatever? I think it would have an incredibly disruptive, whether it's for good or bad, incredibly disruptive effect.
Yes, it would. But once again, it will have an effect if we're to make that type of major change. But once again, that's about leadership, isn't it? The people in charge and the decisions they make.
Well, I had a comment here about, you give a lot of our political representatives a little too much credit, Tom. And
I'm just hopeful.
Their knowledge base or their willingness to become educated about any given thing that they're passing legislation on.
Yeah, who actually reads a whole bill? It's way too many pages there. I could use it to start a fire. Thank you, LindaAnn. Dr. Emmy, back to you.
I need a fire. So I just want to touch on kind of that future readiness again, and what is futurism and what is it not? And I think traditional strategic planning will really make some tangible decisions on what you're going to do in your next 2 years, 1 year, 5 years, whatever those strategic planning things are. But when you look at the concept of futurism and employing some of this tools, it's not to set in stone a strategy for 25 years, right? It is to start doing what you call horizon scanning, what's on the horizon, what possible things are happening, and then making many plans, right? And many sets of adaptable plans, not just this is our strategy and we've set it in stone and we've done it, but using those plans with an S, right, for possible futures with an S, and taking that mindset and doing many different kinds of planning for the possibilities that are on the way. And, includes real tangible tools, trend analysis or scenario planning. I've mentioned as a couple of them, but really a lot of it also is like thought experimentation. What do people think this particular future might look like and how it will impact people and our customers, right? So Rich brought up a great point about customers, understanding the customer persona, right? What are their pain points? What are they really wanting? What is the market changing to make them want, right? Amazon made us want fast delivery, right? Like we want to buy more, we want it delivered to our door between 5 and 10 p.m. I use that as a factor sometimes. I'll hit Prime and then I'll say, what can I get today? Depending on why I need it or what it is, right? Maybe I have an immediate need in my mind for something and it's easier to order it and have it delivered than go to another store like Home Depot, which has impacted our retailers, right? And so these changes that we're seeing in all kinds of different markets are based on our customers, they're based on our employees, And they're based on our leaders' decisions. And I love the question of what is an ethical leader, right? And there are all kinds of different models out there. In fact, that's what I designed, was a leadership model about human ethics focused leaders, right? It's called HEARTH, Human Ethics Approach for Remote and Tech Hybrid Teams. So it is a little bit more niche on the technology integration side, but there are other models out there really discussing traditional ethical leadership, what is changing, what needs to change. And so there's a lot of research out there now about that sort of ethical mindset and some changes. So there's models out there. I hope to get mine out into the world very soon as well. But, really when we're thinking about what ethics means, I think that's a big conversation that we need to continue to have, because we are thinking about the Bitcoin, this is stuff that we're seeing all the time, right? We're seeing these conversations happening, and we're seeing them happen by key players in these areas that are invested in these technologies, right? So I think that's something that we need to consider as well. People who own these companies, who have a personal invested interest in pushing these technologies forward, right, are often at the forefront of that conversation about it because they have a financial interest in the tech. You see that in the medical field too, certain pharmaceuticals that get a really heavy push out there because that company that developed it has people out there on the ground making a concerted effort. Not that it's the best product for the customer, it's just the loudest in that time, right? Or it's the most invested in at that time. And so knowing that as a leader, I think those are some of the things that we really have to consider when considering ethics as a leader. And I do think ethical leadership needs to be part of that future ready mindset. I mean, we are impacting future generations, not just our own, just as our predecessors made decisions that affect how we're operating in our day-to-day life today. And having that sort of not just our generation, but what are we leaving behind mindset, I think has to be part of that future ready conversation as well.
Well, talking about future ready, you also mentioned involving employees. And right now, I think globally there's CEOs, hunkered down in their C-suites. The doors are locked. They've skipped the dishes. They're going to get some food brought in because they need to make a discussion or a choice about the future, but they're not asking their employees. So what's the value of bringing them into the conversation?
The employees are the ones that are going to be delivering the work, right? And if we want engaged employees, which we know equals more productive employees or more effective employees, or if we want people that are going to deliver what you want them to deliver, you have to consider their opinion. I've worked for places that never would consider the employee opinion, and those are really uncomfortable, awful places to work, right? When you have no level of even contribution authority, right? Like I can't even contribute my opinion because I know it's going nowhere. It's going into a dead closet somewhere or in one ear and out the other somewhere. And those are not happy employees. They're not engaged employees. They're not employees that are going to deliver what you have tasked them to deliver. And then, you'll hear the kind of argument, well, that's why we should employ AI or robots because they don't have feelings and all of those things. But at the end of the day, I mean, like we said, there are systemic impacts to people not working too. And I think that's really where that ethical leadership has to start meeting the employee at the table.
Is it ethical, or sometimes is it just knowledge? The reason I bring that up is I was talking to a friend recently. They've got a new executive who's come into the organization. The executive is doing a great job with an email that they sent out going, hey, I need to meet people in the organization. I'm going to start meeting with the managers and the supervisors and the executive directors, but no one lower. Like they did not talk about talking to anybody below leadership. Is that something that needs to change?
I think so, but I've seen it not break down silo, so that silo or that mentality of a certain level is like the only one invited to the room. I still experience that myself even today, right? I do think it needs to change. I think we have to start intelligently explaining why to leaders in a way that speaks to their heart. And I know that not every leader is heart driven or leading from that heart, right? But those that will can make a very big impact, not just in their organizations, but in their employees, where they go later and how they lead later when they get to those roles, right? So I think the leaders who will connect with the heart of the employees are going to be able to make some pretty big impacts. So I very much encourage them to.
Well, maybe that's a good place to leave it today, because if we can just get leaders to work from their heart, we might just end up with that future that benefits us all. So thank you very much for that, Dr. Emmy. And thank you very much for leading us this month. It's been absolutely fantastic. Great topics. As always, we sort of go off into tangents, but really good discussion today. So thank you very much for that. I don't know what we're going to be talking about in May. Jeremy hasn't let us know yet. But I'm sure he's got some great things planned for us. So thank you very much, Dr. Emmy. Thank you, everyone, for contributing today. And Dr. Emmy, if you want to count us out, we'll see everyone back here 1 week's time.
3, 2, and 1.